Look around you. The systems are failing. The currency, the court, the Constitution. And no one is coming to save you. You feel it. You see it. But you've been told to ignore it. This isn't paranoia. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's collapse. Designed, accelerated, and now unavoidable. So what's your plan? What happens when the banks close? When the grid goes down? When they come knocking and you have nothing protected, nothing structured, nothing left? You don't need a bunker. You need a protocol. The collapse protocol is the plan for people who still think clearly, who want to live, thrive, and protect what's theirs, even in a world gone mad. You don't have time. You don't have backup. But now you have this. Collapse protocol from Twain Consulting before the end begins. Contact us as soon as you can. Facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call us at 213-465-0639. And hello, everybody. It's Friday, the 18th of July, 7 a.m. or thereabouts, maybe a minute or two over if you're listening to me live. If you're listening to me on a podcast, of course, it doesn't matter. But this is Politics by Jake, as usual, broadcasting to you out of Los Angeles, California, where we are located. Flagship station actually in Loma Linda, but that's okay. And we do our bi-weekly thing, Mondays and Fridays, 7 a.m. Pacific time. And we have an overview, a strategic overview, and a summary. And I confess that we rarely get to all the things that I want to cover. I just feel it's really important, and I stay up at nights and think, oh, how can I do this better? Now, I actually kind of do, because we want, among other things, we want you to be well-informed. We want you to understand everything that's going on. It's important to understand what's going on in the United States. Also important to understand what's going on in the world, because it all has to do with being an intelligent voter, exercising the sacred franchise of the vote, and you can't do that if you really don't know what's going on. So political education is something that we do. And with that, I could say some more, but I could say about the embarrassing things about how I realized that I was politically inept back when I was 18 years old with Rockefeller and with Nixon. And I'm not going to talk about that now. I've talked about that. You've heard me talk about that before. We'll just go on. Stay tuned for further shows if you want to find out about that. That'll come back up again. Anyway, we've got this thing that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk on Monday about the Muslim Brotherhood and kind of what's going on that. But I want to talk first about this thing with Trump's base, which is like turning on him over his perceived involvement in the Jeffrey Epstein cover-up. And the full Epstein client list was allegedly released, though, the veracity of that claim remains unclear, and Trump supporters are calling out on his association with Ghislaine Maxwell, his wish of well to Maxwell during her trial, his repeated evasions about the nature of his relationship with Epstein. And there's a surge of internal social media backlash against Trump, and it's particularly from right-wing influencers and figures. Trump lied about knowing Epstein well. This is, relatively clear. I don't understand. I mean, I guess that the reactionary and the base, shall we call them? Let's just call them the base. They're a little slow in getting up to speed on this, but it's well known, really, that Trump knew Epstein well. Trump's own biographer confirms a longstanding friendship with Epstein. Trump is not on the client list necessarily. Of course, we don't know. But many of his allies are suspicious about why he isn't mentioned. And Trump's base is now questioning if he's being protected or protected others, and just exactly what it is that, he might be hiding. And he's silent about this. And when he's not silent, he's evasive. And he's his inaction is signaling guilt to his own followers. And the final implication is that the right is ready to eat its own, and Trump may no longer be immune. So you're listening to Politics by Jake, of course, and let's talk about something that the media is barely touching. Of course, the media is corporate, it's corrupt, it's controlled. You listen to Politics by Jake because you know this, you're politically active. So they're not talking about the indictment, not the trial delays, not Hunter Biden or some, shiny new impeachment toy for Jim Jordan. I'm talking about Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that Donald Trump's own base is now turning on him for covering up his ties to that predator. And yes, you heard that right. The MAGA diehards, the conspiracy crowd, the QAnon faithful, they're beginning to eat their God. And this is a moment you need to understand because it's one of the most dangerous fractures in our current political landscape. Not because it will stop Trump necessarily, but because it could unleash something, even worse. In the last week, right-wing influencers, once Trump's most loyal shock troops, has started openly attacking him. Because he told a reporter that he wouldn't release the names on the Epstein client list. And he said to them, it was not my thing. And he said he didn't want to hurt people. And that silence, that refusal, well, that was all it took. The conspiracy faithful exploded. And the key point here is that they just didn't call him weak. They called him complicit. They called him a protector of pedophiles. You can go see this for yourself. Posts on Truth Social, X, Telegram, blasting Trump for being in on it, saying that he's part of the same satanic cabal they once believed he was fighting. And, when I look at this, I roll my eyes and I shake my head, but this is what they say. And it's not the liberals who are attacking him over Epstein now. It's the ones with Q in their bios. Now, let's remember the real history here. And let's be real about this, and let's face the facts. Donald Trump was friends with Jeffrey Epstein for 15 years. They lived near each other in Palm Beach. Epstein was a frequent guest at Mar-a-Lago. Trump called him a lot of fun, said he liked women, quote, on the younger side. Those are, his own words. And let's not forget that Virginia Jeffrey, the Epstein victim who helped break open the entire case, worked at Mar-a-Lago when she was 16 years old. These are facts. These are uncontestable. These are uncomfortable. These are undeniable. So, when Trump pretends to be the champion of the exploited, when he promises to root out the deep state, and then turns around and protects the client lists, well, even his loyalists start to flinch. So why now? Why are these people turning? Because the truth is bleeding through. Because the right-wing outrage machine has conditioned these people to expect vengeance, spectacle, justice. And Trump's refusal to name Epstein's clients, that's betrayal. These people built a fantasy where Trump was a messianic figure fighting global child trafficking rings. Remember the D.C. pizza parlor and the pedophile ring in the basement, which is a bunch of nonsense, but it had literally several iterations? That's what I mean. And now, to them, I won't say to them, he's acting like a coward, or worse, like someone who has something to hide. And the grift and the endless fundraising off that fantasy, it's starting to rot. Because once you create a cult, you have to keep feeding it blood. And Trump blinked. He blinked. Now, here's where it gets ugly. If Trump falls in their eyes, not to Democrats, not to the courts, but to his own QAnon acolytes, do you think they'll go home and meditate? No. They'll look for a new savior. They'll look for a new prophet, someone even more extreme. And I've talked to you about this here on Politics by Jake. I've said, if you think that Trump is bad, the ones that are coming behind him are worse. And we're talking about a vacuum of leadership now in the most paranoid, the most heavily armed, disinformation fed, thank you, Fox News, thank you, OAN, thank you, Newsmax, disinformation fed faction of American politics. I look at people in the public places held enwrapped by watching Fox News. It's just It's terrifying. Honestly, it's terrifying. These are the people who believe that JFK Jr. was alive. These are the people who stormed the Capitol. These are the people who think COVID was a CIA plot and that 5G is a mind control weapon. And I mean, Trump has always been a symbol to them. But if the symbol cracks, cult could go rogue. And what's most sickening about all of this is the simple, brutal fact. Trump could come clean. He could blow the lid off the Epstein case. He could release what he knows, because you know damn well he knows something. But he won't. Why? Because he's implicated. If not directly, then culturally. Because he's the rot. As I said, he knew Epstein for 15 years. They lived right next to each other, or reasonably close to each other. Virginia Jeffries used to work for him. She's the one who blew the lid off the scandal. He is the rot. He is the cabal. Remember I talked to you about the fascist cabal that's got control of the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branch? This is it. He is the thing that they claim to hate. And this is the great irony of this. The movement that worshiped Trump is now tearing itself apart, because Trump is everything that they were afraid of. And they're beginning to have, real buyer's remorse. You want to know where we are in the collapse of this country's moral structure? You don't need to look any further than this. The QAnon right has discovered the truth about Trump. Not through journalism, not through justice, but because he broke faith, because he failed to deliver the performance. And that's where we are, a nation unraveling, because reality finally walked on stage and said, your emperor is protecting a pedophile network. And they didn't boo the stagehand. They turned on the emperor. You're listening to Politics by Jake. We'll be back after this. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, I'm Jake with Twain Consulting. And if you're a business owner, freelancer, or entrepreneur, protecting what you've worked so hard to build starts with solid agreement. Imagine having agreements that make misunderstandings disappear and costly disputes a thing of the past. Get It in Writing is the all-in-one legal form package designed just for people like you, savvy entrepreneurs who want clear, enforceable contracts, whether you're hiring trusted contractors, leasing space, or closing deals that move your business forward. Get It in Writing provides easy-to-use, professionally drafted forms that save you time, money, and stress. Right now, you can get full access for just $99. That's 80% off the regular $497 price. A limited time opportunity you don't want to miss. Picture the peace of mind you'll have, knowing that your business is fully protected so you can confidently focus on growth and success. Don't wait until the unexpected happens. Take control. Secure your business today with Get It in Writing. Call us now at 213-465-0639 or visit facebook.com/Twain Consulting to get started. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, we're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/Politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together. Okay, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. Now, I want to talk about this primary where Mamdani, who is kind of an ultra-leftist, I think that you'd have to describe him, he actually won the candidacy, and this is kind of it's an interesting situation for several reasons. Let's talk about this guy a little bit. So, okay, what does Mamdani offer? Well, on the one hand, some of the reforms are fine. Rent freeze he's offering. Rent freeze, that's good. But what the ultra-left does, the disappointment is the ultra-left is a sectarian. He can't compromise, and Mamdani's that's what he is. He's an ultra-left. And we'll go into this, and we're going to get into the Muslim Brotherhood, and I promised I would do this. I said I would do it on Monday, but, it just wasn't happening, so we're doing it now. So, therefore, what you've got then is a crippling additional larding or overlay of ideology on top of something which, if it didn't have that, it might be viable. But now, with Mamdani, it's worse. Because what he brings in is a really incendiary issue. And that somehow the city of New York has to be the battlefield on which the Israeli-Palestinian dispute is fought out. And it's like, why do we need that? Don't we have enough trouble? It's the federal government. The State Department is where this should be fought out. And I'm for doing those things. But the questions that you'd have to ask Mamdani are, why are you bringing Palestine into New York City politics? What's the point of that? And they say, well, of course, Mamdani would say, I'm from the third world. I understand how everything in the world seems to be different when you're in the third world. And I'm like, well, great. This is still New York City, okay? It's not officially part of the third world. Some people might say it's gotten so bad that it almost is. This is the ideology of the BRICS to begin with, right? The BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, I guess. This is a postmodern ideology. This is, and you don't have to know about everything. Actually, I would like you to. This is political education. This is what we do here at Politics by Jake. This is okay. So this is a postmodern ideology because it says settlers are bad, colonialists are bad. Well, I mean, they're not, that many colonies anymore. It's still the same, but, you get the idea. Third world is good. Third world is morally better. And we've tried very hard to point out this is Rousseau. This is Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the 1700s in France. Age of Reason. I think he died in, 1778, thereabouts. On the eve of the French Revolution, he leaves the scene. And this is the idea, that the more civilized you are, the more advanced you are, the more you have property, technology, social development, the more evil you are, the more corrupt you are. And in Rousseau's mind, civilization equals corruption, and therefore, people that are economically underdeveloped are more pure, according to this concept. These are the vessels of purity, whereas the civilized world is, the vessel of corruption, oppression. And this is a deeply rooted ideology of the current modern world. And it comes from all kinds of things, colonialism, fight against it, and you have a number of aspects like this. So you go to Mamdani and you ask him, so what do you say about this slogan, globalize the Intifada? Now, as I said, Intifada, one of my few Arabic words, this means an insurrection. It means an uprising. It means a revolt or something like that. So to globalize the Intifada, what does that mean? Does it mean turn the entire world against Israel? Or does it mean that presumably one going to overwhelm the others through a globalized Intifada? Anyway, this is a can of worms. And the Democratic Party does not need this. It's splitting its divisions. And we've always said the ultra-lefts are often perpetrators, whether they know or not, of fratricide. Because their business model, how they get elected, is to attack incumbent Democrats. We had Hogg, as I said, he wanted to institutionalize that. He said, let's have a situation where the Democratic Party, through or a number of deputy national secretary, was going to promote primary challenges to Democrats in safe seats because they were too stodgy or something. They were not radical enough. And that looks like that has been ended. But a lot of bad blood, a lot of energy lost. Democratic National Committee should have been focusing on doing things to begin to slow down Trump, prepare for his loss of power. But that's not what happened. So the ultra-left business model has to be rejected. The political party has to be there to win elections. Okay, but now questions for Mamdani. Okay, but let's think of some because it looks like he's going to run. I mean, well, he is. He's the Democratic nominee. I'm thinking Cuomo may run, may well run. Cuomo may turn out to be the only hope of the Democratic Party of overcoming this challenge. Many people now say Mamdani is an act. Mamdani is performative. Mamdani is going through a playbook. And I think there's a lot to that. For example, Mamdani, when asked what do you mean globalize the Intifada? And he says, well, what I mean by that is this is a kind of a doctrine of universal human rights. And I'm like, oh, okay. Universal human rights, eh? Let's see how universal your universal is, okay? Around the end of March of this year, not so long ago, we had this situation where a political rebellion in Gaza erupted. And the political rebellion was down with Hamas. Down with Hamas, down with Hamas. It was heard in any number of localities, and in particular, the biggest one seems to have been a place called Beit Lahia. Beit Lahia house, Beit house. That's what it means. Okay, then Lahia is a family that used to live there, so this is in northern Gaza. And this was around the 25th of March, okay? And there was a demonstration. This was on American television. So anyway, with 3,000 participants, they were flying the white flag, and they were saying, we want to end the war. And I've talked to you about this before. Hamas had no plan. They had no plan for the retaliation of Israel, except that they wanted their own citizenry to be killed so they could foster worldwide outrage. These people are incorrigible. They're just corrupted to the extreme. What you need to do, I said a few shows ago, is that when you have a situation like this, you need to do what Lee did at Appomattox. Lee was outmatched, couldn't get out of it. He needs to stack arms, and he needs to go to the commander of the Union forces and surrender. And Hamas isn't doing that. They just want to keep the war going. They want this outrage. This is a part of their business plan. It's cruel and it's vicious for the citizenry. This is why I always talk about Hamas. Hamas hates its own citizenry. They hate the Gazans. And this is kind of demonstrative of that. Anyway, they're waving white flags. This is back in March, around the 25th of March. We want to end the war. We want to surrender. We're happy to surrender. We want this to end. And we want Hamas out. In other words, political protest. Peaceful. To petition for the redress of grievances. Where have you heard that before? United States Constitution? Declaration of Independence, perhaps? Right. Human rights. And if it doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean anything. So there were these people, the slogans, Hamas out. Hamas are terrorists. Yes, they are. We want peace. We want to eat. Down with Hamas. And there were even slogans, I don't have those to quote, but there were slogans, according to some accounts, against the Muslim Brotherhood itself. Because the Muslim Brotherhood's fingerprints are all over Hamas. So it looks to me like a political revolt. There are some people like the Deutsche Welle. They were so embarrassed. Oh my gosh, Hamas. It's like Hamas is now sacrosanct. This cannot be. You have to think clearly about this. Hamas is trying to wed themselves with the Palestinian people. Hamas is the enemy of the Palestinian people. Hamas is primarily the reason why all this misery has been visited upon the Palestinian people. And it's very important to be clear about this and to understand this. And Hamas is, of course, the Gaza branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's one of the ways Hamas was built up. It was built up with the complicity of General Sharon, who was then the Israeli housing minister. And what he did was this. He said, let's create a counterweight to the PLO, which you've heard me say on this show. I'm not for those guys either. PLO, Yasser Arafat. We can create, this is Sharon speaking, we can create something that's even more extreme. So nobody could ever demand that we Israelis would ever have to talk to them. So let's create Hamas. And they did, artificially. So Israel is, actually kind of complicit in this. And the way Hamas got in was to build a base of support at the beginning through social services, of affordable doctors, affordable food, all important, affordable recreation, childcare, things like this. Community social services, except that they had an election in the mid-20s. And after that election, remember the slogan then became one person, one vote, one time. This is like the Muslim Brotherhood. It's almost exactly like it. And since, 2007, I guess, that was the vote. And they're still there. And they will not leave. So we also, if you look a little on the internet, you'll find various kinds of videotape film of these are now Israelis doing this, right? So you have to approach this, with necessary caution, but they have people there. And as soon as they're seen, these women start screaming down with Hamas. There's one woman who's saying the IDF is better than Hamas. Hamas is the worst. And this is Politics by Jake, and we will be right back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake to tell you you're not crazy. The system is rigged. Help us say it louder, won't you? Join us at patreon.com/Politics by Jake. So, all right, this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And I am getting to this thing of talking about the Muslim Brotherhood. In French is les frères musulmans, the Muslim Brotherhood, le frérisme, what can we call it? The fraternity, fraternalism. It means the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the warning is that they're active in local government. And you may say, well, what the heck with the but? No, this is important. Listen to me. Politics by Jake. This is Jake talking to you. This is a thing. You need to know this. So stick with me on this. They're targeting mayoral elections. And the idea is that in 2026, there will be a series of municipal, local, and mayoral elections. And I guess city council, too. I think so. In France, that is. So this is timely. And you say, Jake, why are you talking about France? Well, hang in there, because a lot of the stuff is happening there. A lot of the stuff is happening here in the United States, too. You need the background on this. This is what I'm giving you, okay? So the areas where the Muslim Brotherhood has organized itself include these local governments already. And I think there are three sorts of control, more or less, of the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think we do have some here in the U.S. I hesitate to identify them without some more specifics. But that's, again, sort of the idea. Governments, schools, obviously, means universities. I've tried to stress here before, I found any reports from any government that the biggest vulnerability of falling under the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood is, are you a postmodernist? Because if you're a postmodernist, you're practically there with the Muslim Brotherhood. You believe that the Western world is evil. You agree with Rousseau. I talked about that in the last segment. Modern civilization, the more it has technology and property and organization, the more of that you have, the more corrupt you are, and the more evil you are. And that, of course, Well, you would expect to think this. The United States is an abomination. The United States, the modern state par excellence, as we've talked about, the United States was an abomination. The United States was created for slavery, for racism, for oppression, for imperialism, for plutocracy, and all the rest of this stuff. And I have to say, you do find elements of all that. You do. You do find elements. But to say it's a great leap, and you're really going off the deep end to say that the United States is the main force of evil in the world, it's absolutely bonkers. It's, like I said, it's completely off the deep end. It's crazy. So getting back to what I was saying, the vulnerability of the Western intelligentsia of all religions, most of them don't have a religion, but it's based on self-hatred, the self-hatred of the West. The demoralization of Western civilization, which is more or less after World War II, but in particular with the Vietnam War and the horrors of the Vietnam War, and now it continues, the gaslighting presentation of what's going on in the Middle East, equally, I think, distorted in many key ways. So governments, schools, mosques. We're told that in France there are 2,800 mosques. Most of these places are perfectly normal. But 7% of the mosques are under the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood. And that indicates that there are 91,000 mosque goers who are in the 7% of the mosques out of the 2,800 total mosques. And that small fraction is attempting to take over the others. In other words, to seize political leadership and seize the initiative. Okay, so what's the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood? So in 1928, we have Al-Banna. I've talked about this a little bit. This was the British intelligence. They sponsored it. They wanted it. The British did not want Egyptian nationalism. The British did not want secular nationalism, non-religious. In other words, people who were Muslim in the manner of tradition, in the family, but not really religious. Thinking more about politics, economics, military affairs, things like that. So this was the Wafd Party, WAFD, Nationalist Party, sort of pre-Nasser. Abdel Gamal Nasser, president of Egypt. This is what there was. So in 1928, Al-Banna created the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, as French experts, I was just listening to some discussions that they've had on the radio in France, and they say that when this guy Al-Banna founded the Muslim Brotherhood, he was looking a lot at fascism. He was looking at Italian fascism, which had been going on since 1922, arguably a little longer. But since 1922, definitely. The first fascist republic, Admiral Horthy, in I think it was Hungary. So anyway, Jake in a moment of solitude trying to remember the first fascist. Anyway, and that, of course, that's a lot of what's going on. There was the finding of Professor Manfred Halperin at Princeton in his book on the Muslim Brotherhood, the first one, which was for many years, starting in the 60s, which was that this was a form of fascism in public life, coming out of precisely, the heyday of Mussolini in particular, and the rising tide of similar things in Germany and elsewhere. So, we talk about fascism on this show, and we don't want to call it authoritarianism. We don't want to call it reactionaryism, which is actually a different thing. We don't want to honor it with those names. We definitely don't want to call it conservatism, because that's not what it is. It's fascism. If you go into Wikipedia, you find that there's like 30 different kinds of fascism. If we don't talk about it, you're going to be deceived. It's here, and it's been here for 100 years. Okay? 1922, I said. 1919, actually, if you go back to Admiral Horthy. So the goal of this particular one, the Muslim Brotherhood, is not to be secular. First of all, to assert that the base of identity is a religion, their interpretation of the Muslim faith, but what they want, therefore, is not secular, but religious, you see. And of course, that opens the door to many forms of manipulation and domination. Oh my goodness, does it ever? The goals are two. The first is to restore the caliphate, and that is to say the Muslim Empire. And when we talk about the caliphate, this means from the 1450s on, more or less, until when the Eastern Roman Empire fell, and more or less until the early 1920s, the middle 1920s. It had been in Constantinople, Istanbul, Turkey on the banks of the Bosporus, and this was the Caliph of Constantinople. It was the leader, the political religious leader, because in that system, the political and religious, they're one and the same. They're the ones that are there. So in other words, it had lapsed, okay? It had ceased to exist. Ataturk in Turkey had said no. No, we don't have any more room for the caliphate anymore. We're not doing that. But the idea then was coming out of Egypt in an attempt to restore it. And, it happened very soon after Ataturk said, no, we don't want it anymore. Of course, British intelligence pushing hard in this direction. It doesn't mean that the British control the Muslim Brotherhood anymore. They don't do that. I think it's gotten out of their control. I mean, look, it's present in 90 countries. So it's a caliphate that they want to have. In other words, not the existing forms, not the existing Arab states. It negates the existing Arab states. You could say like this. You could say, well, I'm an Egyptian, or I'm a Syrian, or I'm a Turk. And they would say, no, that's not good enough. You have to be a subject of the caliphate. And the content of this is Sharia law. So let's talk about that. Sharia law. This is a body of jurisprudence and traditions and other things, which include essentially the reduction of women to a very subordinate, very understated role in society. In society, in a society like this, they're deprived of many rights. They're subjected to formal, legal, customary male domination in most phases of their existence, which I think we here in the Western world would say, look, no. First of all, no. Because Western civilization has, in general, a much more elevated concept of women. You can say it goes back to the French. You can call it the courtly love stories of the year 1000 or 1100 or 1200. You can see it reflected in the French troubadours. You can find it above all reflected in Dante with Beatrix, right? You can find it reflected in Petrarch and Laura and so forth. So the Western tradition, surprisingly, turns out to be much more interested in better rights, improvement in the situation of women who are seen to be possible agents of enlightenment and indeed salvation. In the case of Dante, to be sure. Metaphorical? Maybe. But still, nevertheless, real. All right, then. So Sharia law, then the brutal punishments meted out for what you'd have to say when you look at it are considered to be either no offense at all or very minor offenses. So it has nothing to do with Anglo-Saxon common law. Sharia law, Anglo-Saxon common law, they're completely incompatible. And nevertheless, the striking thing about the present day is that minorities coming into countries as immigrants and this persistent pernickettiness, where sometimes they say, we're going to create our own separatist communities, and screw you, and screw your common law, and screw your freedoms, and screw your rights. That's pernickettiness. Call it pernickettiness. And the other time, the innovation of the Muslim Brotherhood is to say, no, that's not good enough. We want to take over the countries into which we are immigrating. And this, of course, then is noticed. And it becomes grist for the mill of the most reactionary and xenophobic forces. So here's the question now. What's wrong with, or I should say, what's with Islamophobia? And with that, let's take a break. And this is Politics by Jake, and we will return. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake. Do you like what you hear right now? Support the real talk then. Go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake right now. Every dollar helps fight the noise. And this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And we left off talking about Islamophobia, and a phobia is an irrational fear combined with, hatred. And the Muslim Brotherhood is making a lot of this, saying, look, it's not us. You don't have anything to worry about. But what they're saying in Paris is, we have our fellow citizens, our Muslim, Islamic fellow citizens who practice a religion. But they're saying the doctrine of the Muslim Brotherhood is not religion. It's a political project masquerading or using the cover of religion. And the political project is a frontal attack. Actually, it's not frontal. It's clever and indirect. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But it's a complex attack on the French Republic. So just as a reference point, the French Revolution starts in the 1790s. You had the First Republic, and then you had the Second Republic for a while after that. The Third Republic emerges in the wake of the defeat of the Franco-Prussian War of the 1870s. That's the Third French Republic. That goes for a long time. That goes until about 1940. It falls when they vote themselves out of existence, and that's when Vichy France was created, and there's no more republic. And then the Fourth Republic starts from about 1944, when de Gaulle gets back into France, until about 1957. And then, after that, you have the Fifth French Republic, and that's the one that you have today. And what's the main principle of this? And I'm saying this to draw the distinction, because this is very important. The main principle of this is secularism. It's not religious. The French Republic is not religious. It's secular, and it's important. Because remember, the Roman Catholic Church was built into French political life in the form of the three estates, right? You may not know this. Just go with me on it. The first estate, the nobility. The third estate, the bourgeoisie, that's the working people. The peasants, of course, they were no estate at all. They had nothing. But in the French Revolution, the third estate was the French National Assembly. And with that, the French Revolution is on its way. This is after the American Revolution, by the way. But you have to argue that it was profoundly influenced by the American Revolution. And this, of course, is the great turning point in the history of the world. It's secularism. It's the excision of religion from politics. This is just, I can't stress enough how important it is and how vile the Founding Fathers knew the interference and presence of religion in political affairs was. Now, so if you have a group that comes into France, which is centralized in form, it's not federal at all. It's done from Paris. They send out, this is what they do. They would send out the intendant to run the provinces or the prefects to run the police, are sent from Paris. They're not local choices because it's the unity of the country has been in question at various times. And the issue then is if a political force emerges which says, first of all, this French Republic is no good. Second of all, we want to have the caliphate. The caliphate. We want to have, France will become part of the caliphate. This is what they do. This is what the Muslim Brotherhood does. And they are the focal point for this. They hide behind these proxies like Hamas, for example, the PLO, for example, not only, but they hide behind it. But the idea is that everything, the world will become part of the caliphate, which would then be located maybe they would go back to Constantinople, or someplace else, and then the third thing they'll say is we want to have Sharia law, so we don't want to have the Code Napoleon. It's to a significant degree the French legal system. So, secular republic, cold Napoleon, and they say, no, none of that, only caliphate, only Sharia law. And like I said, this is not done in the blunt, it's not direct. It's not done in the blunt and crude way that I've just said. It's done insidiously. It's done through saying, hey, if you want to apply to our sporting group, if you're a woman applying to our sporting group, you have to have either your father or your uncle or your brother or some male relative has got to sign on, got to co-sign with you, as if you were a kid, applying to summer camp, and you needed to have one of your parents sign it. So obviously forces. And by the way, the international headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood used to be in Egypt for the longest time, right? Because that's where it emerged. That's where they fought President Abdel Gamal Nasser of Egypt. They were the opposition to him. They tried to assassinate him. This is back in the 50s. There was a guy called Qutb who tried to kill Nasser, was convicted, was sentenced for that. But now it seems to have moved to Qatar or Qatar. That seems to be the headquarters now. So Qatar, with the biggest military bases, we just heard about it a couple of weeks ago, U.S.-based, biggest one in the Middle East, not Saudi Arabia, it's in Qatar. But Qatar or Qatar is also the country who feels that they can play fast and loose with all these extremist movements, and they can stay in touch with all sorts of strange political manifestations. So it seems to be based there now. So the Muslim Brotherhood is a throwback, and it wants, like all religions, the Catholic religion is no different, by the way, wants to mix religion and politics. This is one of the great things about the American Revolution. It kicked religion to the curb and said, look, you can, whatever religion you want to do, whatever expression you want, stay out of politics. And I've tried to explain why this is. Because in the West, and this goes back to Pope Gelasius, he was born in Africa. He said this, and this was back in like the 400s that he said this. He said, the king is one and the pope is another. The emperor is one, the pope is somebody else. They're separate. They interact, but they're separate. Sometimes they fight. And this was impossible under the Eastern Roman Empire, which some people call Byzantine, and under the Russian system or the Islamic system, which somehow seems to be something that came out of the Eastern Roman one or the Byzantine one, at least to some extent. And that's another aspect of the story. We've talked about that before. We will undoubtedly talk about that again. So the idea is that nobody wants to oppress the average Muslim. But the ones who make up this group, this explicitly political group with the political process. So once again, to reiterate, the French are saying our fellow citizens, our compatriots who happen to be Muslim, they are not a political target at all. We want them to be free to exercise their religion in every way that they want. But the borderline is when you're calling, in other words, that's when we say, oh, hold on a minute, just wait a minute. It's the calling for the abolition of the republic, when you're calling for the institution of an entirely new legal system, which is not called Napoleon, but Sharia law. And again, as we said, proposes brutal punishments, all out of proportion to some of the offenses, and sometimes for no offense at all. That's Sharia law. And again, we would say here, not the Anglo-Saxon common law or anything like that, or constitutional law, which we now have. This is different. So someone may say, Jake, are you dissing the Arab world? Is this somehow that you don't like the Arabs? And I say, well, no, it's the opposite. And let me just characterize that by talking about the main Arab countries. Muslim majority all, they're all Muslims there. They have outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood. So Egypt outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood. Same thing for Syria. Same thing for Saudi Arabia. Same thing for the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Same thing for Bahrain. The Brotherhood is illegal in all of those. Within the last month in Jordan, secret terrorist cell was discovered, and it led to the formal banning, outlawing of all the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan. And then we've just had this episode in which the Palestine Action has been banned, outlawed in Great Britain as a result of their attack on the Royal Air Force Base. These guys are indefatigable. The only thing you can say about them is that they're the loyal opposition. They never quit. They never quit. And it's foolish. It's like Hamas attacking Israel with no plan for what Israel's counterstrike was going to be. No plan at all. You know what their plan was? Let our citizenry die. That was their plan. Talking about the Royal Air Force Base, there are similar sorts of sabotage actions going on. In Germany, the Muslim Brotherhood, as I understand it, remains legal. Some of its front organizations have been banned. So this is a threat to national cohesion. You see? It's not a religious question. It's a political question. So how would you put an end to the French Republic? And mind you, notwithstanding that I'm talking about the French Republic here, like I said, they're indefatigable. They're the loyal opposition. They will not stop. They are trying to do this everywhere. And it's very characteristic of the mentality of Hamas in attacking Israel. They're just doing it. There's just this insane, backward, religious zeal that pushes them. And they don't even care about their own people. For the people who say, the Palestinian people, I'm all for the Palestinian people. I am against Hamas. And it is Hamas that has caused this to come upon the Palestinian people. Because what's Israel supposed to do? Israel has tried working with them, and it just hasn't worked. It's just giving them an opportunity. PLO is the same way. People say, oh, well, Yasser Arafat was better. No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. Everywhere he went, when they were thrown out of 4 or 5 countries, because when they would go there, they would immediately try to take over those countries, and they were thrown out. Nobody likes that. There's a perverseness to this that nobody likes. Nobody wants it. And now even the Palestinian people don't want it, because they know that Hamas doesn't care about them. So, I mean, back to what I was saying, how would you put an end to the French Republic? How would you institute Sharia law? How would you dump the Code Napoleon? You know what I mean? It's crazy, but they're doing it. They're trying to do it. This is where the sources run out, Maybe others know. I'll do my best, but the only thing I can point out is that it's going to be some kind of subversion. It's going to be some form of upheaval, and therefore, would that be then in connection with some kind of a foreign attack? I think it's important to put that in context. As I said, we can put it into the context of postmodernism, and this is where you begin to connect to the American universities. The French experts think that Europe is the main target. I don't know if they are. I think the U.S. universities, what we saw in the spring of 2024, the pro-Hamas demonstrations, notice it wasn't pro-Palestinian, it was pro-Hamas. In effect, so many campuses, starting with Columbia, so many others, which has given the Trump regime a pretext, a cover story for what they wanted to do anyway, which was to attack the academic community. Well, that was concocted by these groups. And I guess the general idea is that the groups that were most prominent in organizing those campus rebellions are the ones that are reputedly, reportedly, allegedly in the orbit of the Muslim Brotherhood. And once again, it's important that you understand this. This is a thing. This is a political fact. This is going on. France, Belgium, Sweden, I'm sure there will be more. And, one of the main battlegrounds right now is definitely in France. One of the guys in this discussion that I told you about earlier that I was just listening to, his book is called The Importance of Useful Idiots. No, seriously, that's what it's called. The Importance of Useful Idiots in the West for the Muslim Brotherhood. Serious. With the main constitutional reform that Retello proposed, and this is good, I think this is good, is to change, add one sentence to the French Constitution. Nobody can, and this is what it is, nobody can use their own heritage or background to get exempted from the law. In other words, you can't say, yeah, you have the French legal tradition, but our tradition of us immigrants is this other thing, which is quite incompatible. You can't do that. There had already been a French law saying you're not allowed to form separate communities inside France. You're not allowed to have self-contained, hermetically sealed neighborhoods where you don't have any truck at all with the outside world. That's not allowed. All right. So, okay, that's giving you a little bit of helpful information, which I hope you will pay attention to, because unfortunately it's happened. And we could say more, but this is Politics by Jake. We hope you have a pleasant weekend, and we will be back, and you will be back listening to me, God willing, at 7 a.m. on Monday morning. God help you if you're up at 7 a.m. on Monday morning. But if you are, we will be here, God willing. And also, for those of you who listen on podcasts, just whenever. So have a good weekend, and this is Politics by Jake.